Welcome back, friends. Settle in, because tonight's tale drifts out of a lonely stretch of the frontier, where dust hangs in the air, hearts carry old wounds, and two lives cross in a way neither of them expects. This is a story whispered by firelight and remembered in the creak of a barn door, a story of the Old West where silence can speak louder than gunfire. The town of Red Willow sat like a tired animal under the endless sky, its wooden buildings bleached by sun and wind. Folks came and went, but some stayed long enough to gather ghosts. One of those was Illy Mercer, a shy cowboy with shoulders made strong by work and a gaze that rarely met another's eyes for long. He had arrived years earlier with little more than a horse, a bedroll, and a quiet way of being that made people talk less when he entered a room. Illy worked the Circle M ranch on the edge of town. He fixed fences, broke horses, and kept to himself. At night, he ate alone, listening to the wind and the distant howl of coyotes. The other hands joked and drank, but Illy slipped away early, carrying a kind of loneliness that felt older than he was. Across the dry riverbed, beyond the cottonwoods, lived Nita. She was Apache, a widow, and her grief was something you could feel even before she spoke. Her husband had died 2 winters back, taken by sickness that no medicine could turn away. Since then, she lived between 2 worlds, not fully claimed by either. The tribe respected her strength, but sorrow had carved a quiet space around her. In town, some folks looked at her with curiosity, others with fear, but most with the awkward politeness reserved for pain they didn't understand. Nita earned her keep selling herbs, beadwork, and hides. She moved with calm purpose, her dark hair usually braided, her eyes steady and knowing. Loss had not made her small. If anything, it had made her more aware of the fragile heat of being alive. The first time Illy saw her was at the trading post. He had gone in for nails and flour. She stood near the counter, exchanging words with the owner in a low, even voice. When she turned, their eyes met, and something passed between them, brief but unsettling, like the moment before a storm breaks. Illy looked away first, his ears burning. Nita noticed the way he shifted, how his big hands suddenly didn't know what to do. She didn't smile, but her expression softened, just a touch. They began to see each other often after that. At first it was just passing moments, a nod, a shared silence. Over time, a few words. Illy learned her name, Nita learned his. Their conversation stayed simple, about the weather, about horses, about nothing that cut too close to the bone. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in, sharp and unkind. Rain lashed the land, and thunder cracked the sky open. Nita had been on her way back from town when her horse spooked and threw a shoe. She calmed the animal, but the rain soaked her through, and night was falling fast. Illy found her near the creek, crouched by the horse, rain streaking down her face. Without thinking, he dismounted and helped, his movements sure. They worked together in silence, hands brushing now and then, each contact sending a jolt neither spoke of. "You'll catch your death out here," Illy finally said, his voice barely louder than the rain. "My home is far," she replied. "The trail will be mud by now." He hesitated, every lesson in caution, battling something deeper. "You can stay at my place," he said at last, "just for the night." Nita studied him, measuring not just his words, but the space behind them. She saw no hunger there, only concern and a careful respect. She nodded. Illy's cabin was small, clean, and plainly furnished. A single bed stood against one wall, a table and 2 chairs near the hearth. He lit the lamp and stoked the fire, suddenly acutely aware of the narrowness of the space. "I can sleep on the floor," he said quickly. Nita shook her head. "The night is cold. We will share the bed, but with honor." Her words were steady, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Illy swallowed and nodded, his heart pounding like hooves on hard ground. They changed out of their wet clothes as discreetly as possible, backs turned, movements careful. When they lay down, they kept a respectful distance, a small valley of air between them. The fire crackled. The storm raged outside. Illy stared at the ceiling, every sense alive. He could smell the faint scent of sage clinging to her hair, feel the warmth of her presence without touching. His body, traitorous and alive, reacted in ways he could not control. Heat pooled under his skin, and sweat beaded at his temples. Nita lay on her side, facing away, eyes open in the dark. She was no stranger to desire or to grief. She knew what it was to share warmth without words. Slowly, deliberately, she shifted, closing some of the space between them. Her back brushed his chest. Ilifro's breath caught halfway. He didn't move, afraid that any action might break something fragile and rare. "You are trembling," Nita said softly. "I don't mean to," he replied, embarrassed honesty spilling out. She turned to face him then, close enough that he could see her eyes in the lamplight. "The body remembers life," she said. "Even when the heart is afraid." Her hand rested on his chest, not roaming, just there. The simple contact felt heavier than anything Illy had known. He was sweating now, not just from heat, but from the effort of restraint, from the intensity of being seen. They did not rush. They did not cross lines that night. Instead, they lay there, talking in low voices about loss and survival. Nita spoke of her husband, of love that had been real and good. Illy spoke of a childhood spent moving from place to place, never quite belonging. At some point his hand found hers, their fingers intertwined, tentative at first, then sure. The night stretched on, heavy with unspoken longing. Illy barely slept, caught between desire and respect, every shift of her body sending fresh waves of heat through him. When dawn came, pale and quiet, they rose without awkwardness. There was a shared understanding in the way they moved around each other, a promise not yet spoken. In the days that followed, they grew closer. Nita visited the ranch, bringing herbs for the horses. Illy found excuses to ride past her home. The town noticed, of course, but kept its distance. There was something about the way they looked at each other that discouraged gossip. One evening, weeks later, Nita came to Illy's cabin again. This time, there was no storm, only a clear sky full of stars. She stepped inside, uninvited but welcome. "I am ready," she said simply. Illy searched her face. "I don't want to take what isn't freely given." She smiled then, a slow, warm curve of lips. "I give myself." What followed was tender and unhurried. They moved together with care, learning each other not as bodies alone, but as souls carrying scars. The night was filled with whispered names, with the quiet affirmation that they were not alone anymore. By morning, the world outside looked the same, but for them, everything had shifted. They did not speak of forever, but they lived each day as it came, side by side. In a land that took so much, they had found something rare and fierce. And so, in the wide silence of the Old West, where legends are born from small human moments, the shy cowboy and the widowed Apache woman wrote a story not of conquest, but of connection. A story that still lingers like warmth after a long, cold night. If you enjoyed this tale, stay with us for more stories from a time when the frontier tested every heart, and love, when it came, was as powerful as the land itself.